And welcome back to Robbers of Catan Season 4. We have a phenomenal matchup coming to you today for our finals for the season. I can quickly go through. First of all, let me introduce my co hosts for this evening, Anish. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, it's great to be here. I'm excited to see how the finals will turn out here. I think it'll be a very good one. I'm very excited.
Yeah, we've had some spectacular matches along the way. And without further ado, let me quickly introduce our contestants. We have AK-48 in black, Joni in red, Specialist Steve in orange, and Extra Large in blue. Specialist Steve and Extra Large are coming in as the regular season first and second place champions, so they got us bye straight to the finals. AK-48 and Joni won some thrilling semis matches, which you can find on our channel, but we quickly looking at this board, we see that Joni placed down the first settlement. Anish, looking at the board here, is there anything striking out to you?
Um, I mean, first glance, you see a pretty even distribution of resources. I would say there, if anything, we're lacking in wheat. We have a ton of wood. So I'm interested by the first selection here. I maybe would have considered the 5-10-9 with the wheat production there. But Joni does make a good decision, just taking the production. They can't go too wrong. So yeah, we'll see how Orange picks here. What do you think? Where do you think they should go?
Yeah, looking at this board, I mean, it strikes me that timber is really plentiful on two fives, a nine, and eight, and so across the board, though, it's yeah, you're right. Looking at sheep, looking at ore, looking at all the other things on there, nothing else really seems to be particularly weak or strong outside of the wheat. You're right. Like it is, you really do not have wheat access on this board. Just two threes, a 10 and 11, and it is. I think a lot of people would say it's probably most valuable resource. We say I think that's a specialist Steve. You can't fault them taking that 659 spot. Diversity of resources on a six spot for the ore, which is not very easy to come by. Going down to go to that 10-9 on the quick build down, which I think is savvy move. That 10 spot for wheat is the best wheat spot on the board, and so catching a little bit of that is not going to be a bad thing. And it's going to be interesting to hear. We have extra large, deciding to place their settlement now, and I think you're right. Like I think it's hard to over-index on the wheat on this board because a lot of the wheat spaces really do sacrifice elsewhere.
Yeah, I will say it's actually a very interesting play. I think there are a few options here, especially if Orange can take a free road on the way back, right? Then they get a free road. They can cut off anyone who might place on the 8-5-10, pointing in the same direction, trying to race for that extra wheat. Not that they might, but I think there are a lot of good options here. But you do have to get to that wheat. If you don't get to the wheat, then it's going to be really tough for you in the long run.
Yeah, and I mean we can see right now extra large is figuring out where they want to place their settlement. Yeah, the options don't exactly you don't love them. I said that 659 spot I think was for Special Steve is because some good value coming in, and with the 8510 spot already taken, there's not obvious choices here. But I mean, extra large, had 3 wins out of 4 matches in the regular season. You have to trust they know what they're doing, and let's see where they place here. Let's see. They're starting to run out of time. They're using, going well, not really running, but they've been using the whole clock here. But I think, looking here, I think there's going to be some temptation from someone for that 311 spot, 311-6 spot with the 2 wheat on the
Sure.
bottom right, just
Yeah.
because of the fact that it really is the best wheat access you're going to get from these early placements. And so let's see.
I think it'll be good sitting option. I think that's a very strong city option, and just for that alone, right? Like that's a great spot. And
Yeah,
and on top of that, you lock out anyone else from that six or you kind of lock people out from that three wheat and 11 wheat. So yeah, it's definitely not a bad spot. You point down to the 3 for 1 4, you have options.
yeah, and historically in this tournament, development cards have played a really key role in the match. It is whether you're going from longest largest army or not. We've seen Anish, I think you faced this yourself in your previous match. Without development cards, it really can feel like you're being locked out because it has been a priority for so many of the contestants, and so if you don't have those, you don't have the knights, you don't have your monopolies, you're going to kind of fall behind. And so even though there's that 8-5-10 spot with the wood down below, which has great resource production, I think we're going to see some, yep. And we see extra large going for that 6-3-11 spot.
Yeah,
You know,
smart play.
they have a 3-for-1 port down below, which I think, they can build towards that very quickly, get a little bit more wheat from the 11 spot, but more importantly, have that resource flexibility. And yeah, now, if you're AK-48 here, you have two back-to-back placements. I think that, you have to prioritize getting all your resources probably on this board. I mean, you can go for that 8-5-10 spot, but then there isn't really a spot that lets you get access to the other three resources. And so we might
Yeah,
see,
it's a tough spot. It's a tough spot. I mean, if I'm black here, uh, I have to consider a brick option. So probably between the two, you take the 6-9-2, and then you probably get on the way back. But you probably have to sack on one of these resources here and go for the 3-for-1. I would even suggest you could go completely. I mean, yeah, it's tough. I don't know. I'm trying to look at this board. I would suggest honestly a potential double wood wheat at the bottom left, and then a free road, and then cut off, which they do, and cut off orange there to the 10 wheat. I think that'll be a really strong play, and they have to hope that orange doesn't maybe take that wood brick sheep there.
yeah. And we
But I
see,
think blue might take, so we'll see.
yeah, and we see AK-48 going for that 8-5-10 spot that we talked about. It's hard to turn down that sheer quantity of resources at this point in the game. And then going for that 6-9-2 spot up top as well. Very interesting, has minimal ore access for AK-48 with these initial placements and no sheep access. Very well set up for longest road for sure, but gain those development cards, gain those settlements, and trying to get the cities later on might prove to be difficult, especially since it doesn't seem like they have immediate plans to be going after any of the ports, and so trading is going to have to be crucial for them.
I think their potential plan is to hopefully, they're hoping that blue now takes this free road so that orange doesn't take the free road. Um, and if orange doesn't get the free road, then black is in the clear to cut off orange to that 10-9. And they may even choose to settle on the wood port itself because they do have massive wood production. And that wouldn't be a bad play. Just an extra road, which they do have the road building resources. They don't really produce sheep, so they'll have to trade for one sheep. And with that one sheep, they can just settle for that wood port, and they'll be in really good shape after that.
Yeah, and I'm sure, we talked about Spatula Steve with their initial placement, hoping to build a settlement down that 10-9 spot just because it gave them access to good resources. But it looks like they're probably going to get beaten to that spot, unless they can manage to get, that 9-10-11 spot in the middle of the board. AK-48 is going to be able to build that road before they can build their road, and they're going to be kind of left holding the bill for that first road that they placed without anything to show for it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think blue here should probably go for that road. I think that's probably what they're considering here. Um, it's just a very strong and obvious play. They get access to all the resources. They get coordinated 11s because sheep and wheat are commonly used together. Um, so I think it's kind of a no-brainer, honestly, at this point.
Yeah, and we can see that blue is taking their time here. They have about 19 seconds left on the clock. You have to assume that 9, 10, 11 spot in the middle is going to be their first priority just because it gives them access to all the resources they don't currently have with that first placement. Where they prioritize, resource scarcity and having access. Yep, we can see them pulling that 9, 10, 11 spot.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean,
Sharp plays all around.
yeah, an extra large, has, of course, had 3 wins in the tournament. I believe was our first place
Yes,
finisher for the
that's
regular
right.
season, and
Hmm.
showing that foresight here, choosing to go in a way where they now have they definitely have the best distribution of resources across their production. First of all, they have access to every single resource to start the game, and numbers on them don't overlap at all, and so they're going to be consistent. Maybe they're not going to get the sheer number of resources as some of their competitors to start the game, but they have to like the fact that they're going to be able to be very self-reliant. They won't have to rely on trades, and they seem to kind of be setting up not a monopoly because AK-48 is also on a wheat tile, but they definitely are setting themselves up for great wheat production. And so maybe if the roles don't really work out quite well for them, they'll have that at least to trade away.
Yeah. I think this will be a game where table talk will be key. Just because while there are while there are a lot of resources, and I don't think this is a scarce sport at all in general. I don't think everyone has access to every resource, and if they do, it is in a scarce amount, right?
Yeah,
In general, the board is great, but table talk is going to be a very big thing, and I think that six ore will be commonly hit.
that
And I
seems
don't
to
I
be a
don't
big
see
robber target. Yeah.
yeah, I don't think there are any other spots that are going to be as strong to hit. Even those wood spots are not. I mean, black is on three different wood spots. Like it's just not going to happen as much. So uh, we'll see. We'll see how the negotiation goes. Right, that's always a factor in the back end during these
Yeah,
games.
and I think that a lot of people that play Catan regularly would attest to table talk, and the art of table talk can be one of the biggest things that can push you over the edge in a game that can sometimes be hit by a degree of ramness. And to that fact, we're really excited about this match in particular because we'll be giving you the audience some little glimpses into that table talk for some of the key moments of this game coming up. So look forward to that. But here we have Specialist Steve, about going down to the last 30 seconds with their placement. And we can tell, obviously, the stakes are high, decisions are important. And they, with their first spot, locked down their ore production, their wood production, their sheep production. And so now, if they're going to be losing out on that wheat down to 10 to AK-48 to the 10-9,
Hmm.
you have to think that they're considering how they can get access to wheat and brick. And unfortunately, you can't really get access to both of them with one placement here unless you sacrifice significant resource production.
Yeah, and they're just going to go ahead and take a wheat spot themselves, just to get some wheat.
Yeah, and
So.
yeah, and they're getting there's some other options there, but they're getting some good diversity from the spot with the 4 on the ore as a backup to that 6 ore spot, as well as another high production timber spot. Opting against we see Joni taking that 8-3-4 spot, which was the other option there. And we see that, right now we're a way to go. Immediately we have some attempted trade offers with Specialist Steve trying to get that brick that they need to build that road down to the 10-9 spot. We'll see if anyone gives it to them. They're offering quite competitive offers to start this game, but it doesn't seem like we have any takers.
Yeah, and I think those are competitive offers, but those are very fair offers, especially at the beginning of the game, right? Brick
Looking to
is
give
never more
3
valuable. And
resources
yeah,
immediately out of the gate, and I mean
I
that's
would too.
tempting. I think that we might see. Yep, we see extra large blue taking that offer, which interesting offer there. Special Steve, because they gave up so much right there, they didn't build that road though.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about that. I would think that the trade would happen for the road, right? And
Like especially for a 3-for-1 immediately out of the gate, you wonder, what they're thinking is there. But now we have, extra large immediately going up to 7 cards in hand, like just 1 wheat away from a city as well, if my math is right.
yeah, that's a nuts trade, especially in the early game.
Yeah, and for
If
2 ore, which as we know, ore is gonna be quite scarce on the board, getting a wheat as well out of the deal. I mean, it's a great deal. And so I think now the question then is, the world is Blue's oyster. Do they hold on to their cards to try to hit a city next turn, or do they cash it in for a trade or a development card?
yeah, I mean they if I were them, I would probably take the gamble and go for the city, both because it's not like you lose too much just by it. Let's say you go over 7 and you 7 out, you lose 4 resources. It's honestly not that bad. For two reasons. One, because you got three resources for one brick, so your resources are a lot cheaper. But also because it makes you less of a target if you don't build that city, right? So it's not the worst thing in the world in the early game because early game impressions are very important, right? If you build that first city, you'll become a target for the rest of the game. Um, so there are upsides and downsides, but a huge role here for for everyone. So we see already blue is at 9.
Yeah,
It's
and
already a
opting to
risk.
take the risk, and extra large. Actually, if you're curious, you can go back to one of the previous semifinals matches. That's actually, in fact, Brian, who did some commentary with me, and one thing that he talked a lot about during commentary was the value of trying sometimes to not be too threatening, and that there's value in trying to sandbag a little bit and make yourself not an easy target. But we can see here in the finals, he's going for broke.
Yeah, and I respect it, right? There's nothing to lose. You just got to go for first, and I respect it. And he takes the gamble. One more roll is all he needs to survive.
Yeah, and
And
especially for a setup, this there's additional value to the cities perhaps because we talked about the early weakness of his setup is he doesn't have a lot of just raw resource production quantity. His resource diversity is amazing and his positioning is amazing, but he's not going to be just getting the raw number of resources that some of his competitors are going to get. And we see now to his turn with 10 resources in hand. I mean, I think he's going to go for the city here. You kind of have to, I think, with that.
yeah, I think it's the obvious play. I think a city is makes the most sense. You might even consider a road, but there's no point because you'll still be at 8, right? There's no point. You
Yeah,
can't settle here, so city is the obvious choice.
yeah, and I think they can trade away a lot of that excess timber they were getting for lots of nines getting rolled, and they might be spending some time thinking about this because they don't want to make themselves too threatening. But you have to assume if you can take that city on turn 2, you probably want to. But we'll
Hmm.
see. I said like I talked about extra large often has told me the value that he places on trying to prevent himself from being exposed to the robber. And so they might try to go for a little bit of a trickier play, leverage some of the resources, maybe get development cards or shoot for a settlement or something like that. But I think
Yeah.
all those plays hold a fair amount of risk going for the city, which we see they do go for the city. It's hard to in this situation where those extra resources are going to be so valuable and you have that great opportunity early on, it's often best not to overthink it.
Yeah, I think he's in a great spot. That 6 will be hit all game. It is what it is. But the early city is an early city, right? But we
Yeah.
do see the early settle.
Yes. And, Robert immediately going to the 6, we expect that. But yeah, 8K48. Interesting choices here, right? Going for that settlement, which we thought they were have to do. And Specialist Steve, you have to wonder, like, maybe they had that opportunity to go for the 10-9, but it seems like they're opting to go for that 4-11-5 spot in the middle instead, conceding the point a bit for the 10-9, which, you can't really fault them now that they have the 3 wheat. That 4-11-5 spot does have a lot of resource production, but we will
Yeah.
see.
I think everyone's in a pretty decent spot. Like no one's pulling ahead, no one's too far behind. I think Orange is probably in the worst spot just because they got cut off from a really really important wheat spot for them. But they are getting the settle. It looks like on the 4-11-5. So I think it's anyone's game right now. I'm loving this, right? Like people are playing very very well all around.
Yeah, yeah, and like looking at Joni's positioning up two in the top right, they kind of have a monopoly up there. No one's really in their space. Building to that 2-for-1 sheep port, which they're doubled up on the 8, they're on the 4. That 2-for-1 sheep port. They don't have access to ore. They don't really have a ton of wheat, but that 2-for-1 sheep port can start being huge for them, especially if they can get the settle there and then maybe get a city on that 8-4-3 spot as well.
Yeah. I think for red, the general strategy is to use that sheep port, um, and just try to trade in for ore and get a city and just rely on those 2 wheat sheep spots. I think for black, we'll see a similar strategy, except with a lot more wood production if they can get to that wood port.
Yeah.
Orange doesn't seem to be challenging for that, which is interesting. I think that makes sense, just given like they got to settle somewhere before they try to race. But um, I think black is also in a really good spot, just because of that setup.
Yeah, and I think for Specialist Steve, who timer's about to run out on 6 cards in hand, we see they just gave the bank 4 sheep for a single brick, which, like I said, they don't have access to brick naturally, and so they're gonna need to do 4 for 1s if no one wants to take their 2 for 1s. Interesting choice here. We see them, opting to use some of those extra resources to build a road further up, give themselves some extra insurance against extra large to prevent extra large from getting that 411's 5 spot. Maybe also though they could be thinking too about they going for that 9-4 spot as well.
Yeah, I think the 9-4 spot is still very strong. I think they can't be too mad that they didn't make it to the 4-5-11. I think it wouldn't even be worth it to try to race. So I would just go for the 9-4. I think it's a great spot. Just beat black there, and I don't think black is even that interested in that spot. Um, Although maybe they are, right? Maybe they want the extra ore. Maybe that is a race that they're going to have to make with a less brick production. So
Yeah, and
that's actually going to be interesting if that race does happen.
yeah, and extra large blues turn it is right now. They are making some considerations, and if they have the ability to make a road here, they have a tough choice to make. Do they decide to head off Specialist Steve to go for the 9-4 spot up top, or do they prioritize going for the port early? With their resource production, they're probably going to have to do one first and have a little bit of delay for the next one just because they're not getting a ton of sheep, etc., sheep brick, etc. And so it'd be interesting to see how they value their choices here.
Yeah. I think if I were them, I would take the road on the 9-4.
But
Um,
as you say
they
that,
don't do it. Yeah, they don't do it, but I would take the one because at the end of the day, right? They do get the road head start, and maybe they do get plowed by black, but it's I haven't done the resource counting, but I don't know if that's necessarily going to happen. And I would take the risk just for the extra production because you're going to lock up the 3-for-1 anyways. Now where do you go after that? You don't really have any great spots, so it might have been worth it to take the gamble there. I'm not sure.
yeah, and that top right spot or top left spot, pardon. Not only are they competing for spots with Steve, AK-48 is only one road away, and so maybe they're looking at that there, and they think, hey, if this doesn't work out, the risk is quite large. But you're right. You're right. After they build that 11-12 spot, they don't really have great settle options easily available to them, and maybe they're sitting there and thinking, I'll be at 4 victory points. I have good ore production, good wheat production, good. Assuming that the robber's not sitting on the 6 ore spot, my strategy is going to be to pull development cards, get largest army. But with 3 settlements, it's still going to be tough to reach that victory point total of 10.
Yeah, especially on this board, I don't find it super likely just because I don't see the wheat production to get people there that quickly. Um, it's gonna take it's gonna take something more than just like settling, right? Like you're gonna need those dev cards, but to get the dev cards, you need to settle, right? Like you need to settle more than 3 usually, especially on boards like this where there are so many good spots that you could settle to that will get you there faster. And like the people who settle faster in this game, I think will win. Um, and we see that, right? That's what people are battling. That's what people are racing. And now we see again another road to that wood port. That's going to be huge for Black's game if they can
Yeah,
get there.
black at 10 cards in hand, building a road, choosing to stay at 8. They have a ton of wheat in hand. The 10 has been rolled a couple times. But getting that 2-for-1 port for black for AK-48 will definitely be huge in this game. They will be at 4 settlements already. They will get tons of wood from that 9, that 5, that 8 spot. And they'll just say, hey, I don't have good ore production, but guess what? This 2-for-1 port is going to give me all the ore I need.
And on top of that, they can't be robbed, right? Like that's a huge, that's the even bigger part. Even if people want to try to stop them, they can't because it's going to be their own spots that they're robbing. Or even if they do, they have two spots at any time that are at huge production points. Um,
Yeah, maybe that
so it,
10
it's
wheat
really
gets
tough.
blocked, and that hurts
Yeah,
them, of course. But if you're any other competitor here, there's juicier options usually open to you, unless you're afraid that AK-48 is going to swoop in and take the win. And so that could be something for AK-48 to watch out for. Their wheat production might get hit a little bit if they jump out too far ahead, but they probably won't have that target paint on their back until they have at least 4 settlements. And so at that point, the wheat production definitely does matter, but maybe doesn't matter as much as it does for some of their competitors that have less settlements, like, say, Specialist
yeah.
Steve, who's had some bad luck with rolls and hasn't really gotten a ton of resources. That 6 being blocked has definitely hurt them. And there are 5 cards in hand. We can see what they're thinking of doing. It's been very interesting. 7s have gone rolled, but not when anyone's had an excess of cards. An extra large and AK-48 have definitely been flirting with that frequently.
Yeah, I think Orange is in a really tough spot just because they haven't been able to get that first settle. I think even if they get it, the resources they have are pretty incompatible because they just produce too little wheat, right? So the recommendation here is after settling uh, on that 4-11-5, they would maybe attempt to ideally they would attempt to race to the 2-for-1. They won't make it. They don't have the brick production. So the next option, Plan B, is to just settle on a 3-for-1 port. So probably a 3-for-1 port on the 8 brick, just because it has more production. But it's not looking like a great setup, honestly. What do you think?
Yeah, it's tough. Extra large, first of all, getting that snazzy settlement on that 3-for-1 port can be huge for them. But it's tough for Specialist Steve here. And Joni, we haven't talked about a ton because they've kind of been up at doing their own thing. They were able to get that 2-for-1 port as well on the sheep. And it definitely feels like Specialist Steve is falling behind. Not only do they not have that third settlement that all their competitors have, their competitors also then either have a really strong port or about to get a really strong port or cities. And they're in a position here where they don't really seem to have easy access forthcoming to any of the ports. It's going to probably be a few settlements before they start to settle on the ports, especially because they've put so much investment in signaled such a strong investment to building settlements in the middle of the map. And hey, for Specialist Steve, there are 9 cards in hand. It could change quite rapidly if they get 2 quick settlements on that 4-11-5 spot and that 9-4 spot. If they're able to do that, then they're right back in this, and they are perhaps quite scary on this board. But as it is right now, they definitely seem to be falling behind.
They're going to need some table talk. They do have 9 cards. They have options, and they are clearly in last place. So they could get some trades in, but I don't think they can do it, and they do the 4-for-1 for the prick just so they can build a road, which is a strong road, right? It cuts off blue and it attempts to settle there. If you can settle on the 9-9-4, it's a strong spot. You take away from black settling there, and you pretty much secure your own 4-4-5-11. With the potential for getting longest road, right? That's a potential win condition here. Even though they don't even have brick production, they could get longest road and win off of that.
Yeah, and right now we see there. I think it's important to note with building a new road and buying a development card, they could have settled if they wanted on that 4-11-5 spot. I have played a few matches against Specialist Steve. Every single match with Specialist Steve has won in the regular season. They won 3 of the 4. Were come from behind victories where they lurked and then jumped out at the right exact time. And we could see them employing a similar strategy here, it seems, where they are prioritizing setting up for future moves while at the same time trying to downplay their own strength. It is that 4-11-5 spot would have been very tempting to get the extra production, but they opted to buy a development card and build a road to set their future moves instead, which I think is an interesting choice. We'll see how it plays out for them.
Yeah, I think it's a smart play just given probably their current situation. Um, it kind of makes sense. Just fit the role, kind of play it down. Don't make yourself too scary, right? and they don't look that scary at all, right? But I have also played in a match with Spatula Steve, and it was an insane victory, and it can be done, right? Like this is how the game works, right? Like it's a game of ups and downs, right? It's a game of like swings, and you just have to make sure that you time it correctly. So we'll see. We'll see if they can time correctly. Table talk is everything here. So
Yeah, and we see development cards starting to get pulled. But without the wheat production, I think what you said holds especially true. This game probably is not going to progress super quickly. When we see, in our Summon of we see two more roads coming in from Spatula Steve and
yeah,
buying
yeah,
another development card. Spatula Steve locking up largest road right now. And
and locking up the spots.
yep, yep. And that first development card they pulled was Road Builder, which they use, and now they have some interesting opportunities in the future. Of course, they have fallen a bit behind in terms of resource production. Everyone else now is at 3 or 4 spots essentially, if you count cities as 2.
Yep.
But they can build in that 411.5 spot. They can build in that 9.4 spot. They can build in that 6 spot. They have those spaces available to them, which sometimes in a game you might have the resources to settle, but not the roads. And they certainly will have that. And so Spatula Steve is definitely trying to set themselves up for a slingshot later in the game.
Yeah, I think longest road is definitely the way to go for Orange here. They're very far ahead. They've used one of the road buildings, which means only one other player could potentially pull it. And if anything, maybe you could see red connecting and getting to 6 immediately. But it's going to be tough for anyone else to kind of contend at this point. At least anytime soon, right? So we'll see. It's a long game. Longest road does get passed around a lot. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, and it is noteworthy that every single time I look away and the robber moves, I look back and the robber's back on that 6 ore spot. It is, you
Yeah,
called it off right at the beginning of the game. It was such a strong spot compared to the rest of the board, and the investment was so high. But we can see a 7 game rolled, and it has to move away going to that 9 sheep spot. Lots of production there. Sheep maybe not too scary, but it does cut off both Specialist Steve and AK-48 from sheep for the time being.
yeah. I think it's an interesting play. I don't know that I would necessarily have picked there to go, but these are tough spots, right? I think it makes sense just because it's 3 settlements on a spot. You take that and you you get 12. You block 12 spots of production. It makes sense. But sheep is generally not considered a very valuable resource in Catan, just because it's not used in many things when you're building. It doesn't get used in roads. It doesn't get used in cities. It does get used in dev cards, which matters late game. But you need wheat and ore to be compatible. So sheep is generally not the best spot to block anyone's like production, right? Like to kind of move forward in the game. It's kind of a end game halting move at that point.
Yeah, and we see Spatula Steve using a knight to move from that 9, move the robber from their 9 sheep spot to that 10 brick spot. Immediately getting paid off with the 10 getting rolled. Nice little
Yeah,
block. And this, you have to think, is Spatula Steve's like crux for this match. There it is, a 6 game rolled. The 6 is off for them, so the robber's off the 6, so they can finally roll. But we talked about they have the setup that we like. They definitely have a very large road, which we like. But everyone else has 4 settlements now or a city, and everyone else has a port that is extremely valuable. And they do not have a 3rd or 4th settlement, and they do not have a port. And so the question is, how long can they go with this slow play strategy and this setup strategy where they're prioritizing long term opportunity over short term development before the disadvantage becomes insurmountable?
yeah. I think it's very interesting, right? Because when you take longest road here, it's one of the few things that doesn't give you anything in return, right? You just get the 2 VPs temporarily, but you don't get any production. So the one good thing is you do lock up those spots, but the bad thing is you're at 4 VPs just like the rest of the players without the production, right? So you might look scary, but you're not. And maybe that's why the nine sheep gets hit, for example, right? Because even though Orange couldn't really do much with the nine sheep, I mean, maybe they could, right? But it's just going to be
You're
hit.
still at four VPs, and you
There's
still
still
know
four.
by hitting that sheep spot you're going to prevent them from settling, and you also get to hit AK-48, and so it is an interesting point. I think now they really, whenever they have a chance to sell, they have to. There's not really it seems like they've
Yes.
probably exhausted the full setup, and we'll see. Extra large still has kind of stalled out a little bit. They do have that 3-for-1 port now. Hopefully they can use it, especially with the 6 off. They're offering some trades, trying to give that ore they have. We can see them snagging, giving an ore to Specialist Steve. Interesting choice from Specialist Steve. I can't wait to see what they do for that. But if you're extra large, what do you think their strategy is here? Is it just going for extra development cards? They don't really have settlement opportunities, so it seems like it's development cards or cities or bust, huh?
Yeah, that's basically going to be the strategy here. There's nowhere else to settle, which is part of why, right, that Orange play locking out blue and
And
black
also,
most spots is
AK-48,
huge.
can I just say 15 cards in hand? Oh my god,
Yeah,
he's cooking.
crazy, crazy, crazy. We'll see what they do. It'll be an interesting turn, right? They have one
And they have
dev
a
card
two
to
for
remove
yeah.
metals.
They have a dev card which I haven't used. They have a 2-for-1 port for their
Mm-hmm.
timber, which you have to assume 15 cards in hand. A good amount of that is timber.
Mm-hmm. City, right?
I think a city seems like a good option. They could maybe go for that 3-for-1 port to the left on the wood. That spot would both give them a port they don't have access to already. They don't have a 3-for-1 yet. Give them more wood access. But yeah, we could see them just going straight for that city on that 8-5-10 spot. You can't blame
Makes
them.
sense.
Now,
Yeah,
every 10 they get 2 wheat, which is amazing. Or sorry, 3 wheat,
yeah,
which is amazing.
yeah,
And
yeah,
every 8 and every 5 they get any resource they want. It is
yeah. It's huge.
AK-48
I think.
is yeah.
Yeah, they're leagues ahead, and the issue is right. Yes, like you said, they will get hit on the 10 week, but it may not matter, right? Because they just might be too unstoppable at this point. They have free reign. They have access to every resource except ore, but ore they can trade for.
Yeah, and who
Um,
knows? Maybe a random 2 will get rolled up top. They'll get an ore. That's
mhm.
gonna be a big feels bad. But yeah, you talked about it. That 10 wheat spot is the spot you have to block if you're blocking them. But because of the fact that they get so much timber and they have that 2-for-1 port, I don't know how much it's gonna stop them.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting. If the wheat is going to prove important in this game, then maybe it stifles them. But yeah, I mean, if they get that second city, especially on that nine spot, they'll be guaranteed to have two spots in the game at any given point that produce a free resource for them.
Yeah,
That's huge.
but as we can see, this probably does open things up for both Spatula Steve and Extra Large. Now that 6 is going to probably be a little bit less sticky with the Robber. Joni, we can see getting hit here finally with the Robber. Joni's managed to mainly avoid the Robber. Good on them. But we'll see. Spatula Steve is debating right now. They rolled that 7. They moved off the 10, which they kind of have to. That's the only great option available for them. But that's not what you want if you're Spatula Steve. You need AK-48 to be locked down. Otherwise, this can get out of hand quite quickly.
Yeah, I think potentially they're scared of Red taking longest road, which is also why they're probably attacking the brick, right?
Yeah.
That is Red's only brick production, and honestly, other than that, only Black makes brick, so it honestly is a non-factor at that point. The thing is, I don't think the brick really matters for Blue. Um, Blue isn't trying to expand anywhere. They don't
Yeah.
really have any need to go for longest road. So you're kind of only targeting one player, and if you're going to do that, I would honestly just suggest straight up just go for the 8 sheep or the 5 wood. Now you don't have anything to steal from, so maybe that's why. But in general, if you're targeting one player, that's where you would go. But we do
Yeah.
see another robber.
Yeah, we see Extra Large using a Robber here, and it's interesting. You talked about Extra Large has literally no reason outside from trading to want brick. They physically cannot expand anywhere. They are
Yeah,
completely hemmed in on every sides. But so you have to think, what's the value of them moving? Well, they're scared of AK-48 for one. Two, for Extra Large, they're going to need to be on the development card strat. We mentioned that earlier. They are going to max out at 6 VPs from their settlements. And so that's going to mean that they're going to need to pretty much get 2 victory point development cards and get largest army. And we can see all their competitors have been buying development cards. They all have 1 knight. And so I think a good amount of the motivation for extra large using that knight there is to not fall behind in the knight race. But we see immediately the robber gets moved back to that 6 ore spot, and the 10 gets rolled, and that is just huge for AK-48.
Yeah, and I think that's partially why you don't play the knight, just because you'd rather have it on 10 brick than the 6 ore, right? The 6 ore now actually does affect you and affect your chance because you're trying to dev card, you're trying to city. Ore is crucial, wheat is crucial, that little bit of sheep is crucial. Everything else is you're just porting,
Yeah.
right? You don't necessarily need it.
Yeah, we see big move for Specialist Steve using a Monopoly here, only to steal 3 wheat, but on this board, 3 wheat is a king's ransom, and they immediately use it to build a settlement, build a city on that 659 spot. Interesting choice here, I think. I think that earlier in the game, it might be a bit more faulty in terms of that 6 is going to probably host the robber a fair bit. But they're banking on that robber moving down a lot to that 10 wheat spot, opening up their production there, in which case that 659 spot will produce a ton for Spatulous Steve. And hey, they're back in that game now where they have finally improved their production. They, better late than never. And maybe this is the sign that they need where now they have that city there. They can build a few quick settlements up top, and with that largest road, could get very close very quickly.
Yeah, I think it's just very impressive, right? Because you can kind of see they've kind of just rolled out like the red carpet for themselves over here. They can settle in all these spots without any competition. So let's just count, right? They have 1, 2, 3 more settlement spots. Um,
Oh,
that right
well,
there
they're
gets them to
able
dominate the
to.
city.
Wow, in big churn, not
Go
only
ahead.
were they able to city, they were able to settle. It's the
Yeah,
exact kind of churn we've been hoping to see from Spatula Steve for a while now, and
yeah, jumping up to 6.
puts them right back in the thick of things. Of course, they're at 6 VP, but more importantly, they have 3 settlements, and they have a city on one of the settlements, which is right back on par with the rest of their competition. And you're right. Yeah, if you look ahead, they do have 2 easy settle spots. That's something we're talking about with extra large. That's a problem for them, is that they kind of have to play the development card game because they can't get settlement victory points. Especially Steve, that's not going to be a problem, especially because they're on the city. They can now build 2 or 3 more settlements up in that top area, get themselves to 8 or 9 VP, and then another city, a couple extra victory point cards drawn. Spatula Steve's path to victory definitely is starting to take shape.
Yeah, if you just count it right now, right? They just have to get
Oh,
2 more
another
settlements.
10 getting rolled.
Yeah,
AK-48
it's
with
huge.
tons of wheat in hand, but might not be able to actually do too much with it. We've talked about they don't have a 3-for-1 port, and so all that wheat, while it might be super valuable for them in the long run, they can't seem to do a lot with it now. We can see them just going for a development card. They have 2 in hand now, which you still have to think is quite scary. They probably still have at least 2 wheat in hand, and so now even if you block the 10 wheat, they're like, hey, it was off my 10 wheat for a few rolls, and I got exactly what I needed.
Yeah, you just need the few rolls, right? You just need to not get blocked at the wrong time at the end of the day. And it's back on the 6
On the
ore.
6th
So
spot, and the 6 gets rolled and gets blocked
yeah,
again. Tough. And I think I don't want to talk too much about this because I think that it's hard to avoid wanting to put the city on the 659 spot, but we talked about it. The 659 spot's going to be blocked a lot. And we can
yeah,
see
yeah,
Joni getting that largest row. We talked about it. They were well positioned. They got the resource they need now. And it might be tough for Spatula Steve to bring it back. Not only are they now 3 roads behind taking it back, but remember, as of now, they do not have any production for brick.
but I do think that they'll very much consider putting their next settlement on that 6 brick, because
Yep.
they don't need the extra ore, the extra wood. In fact, if they place on the 4, it's more likely to get hit with the robber. Um, they'd like to see that four spot not get hit at all. And instead, why not just go for a compatible resource that they really desperately need? I think the six brick is the right spot to go next.
Yeah, and we can see extra large moving that robber on a 7 down to that 10 weed spot. We think they'll probably do that all game long. They're afraid of AK-48 for sure, and the sleeper pick in all this that's starting to emerge for me is Joni up in the top right. Because of the way they've set up, they have this line of settlements where they are not really super exposed to any individual robber. Of course, if you put the robber on their 5 spot or their 10 spot, they lose access to either timber or brick, but they're kind of getting it all done across the board. And that 8 and the 4, both when they get rolled, give them any resource they want with that sheep port. Joni, we haven't talked about them as much because they've kind of been off doing their own thing and haven't had as many explosive plays as some of the competition, but don't count them out.
Yeah, I did mention that Orange was kind of rolling out the red carpet, but this is a literal red carpet, right? We see Red uh, literally claiming their own spots, their own section here, just giving themselves all the space that they possibly need with the great port already and trying to settle in 3-for-1 just in time to reach the limit of 5 settlements and then go on to cities.
Yeah, and that largest road, you have to assume, even if the 5 and the 10s get blocked, because of how they've set up, they've been so efficient with their roads, it's going to be so hard for anyone else here, whether it's Spatula Steve or AK-48, to take back longest road from Joni. And so Joni all put the settlement on that 3-for-1 port. All of a sudden, Joni's in a position where a couple cities, a couple of victory cards getting pulled, and they're right there at 10. And
Yeah,
we see right on cue a city on the A510.
yeah, yeah. And it could not have come at a better time. The timing is impeccable, and they're in a really good spot right now. I think it's interesting that they didn't play it on the 8-4 sheep. Um, I'm curious about that play, just because with the sheep port, I would much rather go for the sheep than the actual wood.
Yeah, they definitely are missing out a little bit on the wheat production, the sheep production with that choice, but I think that the math they're doing is those, even if they're blocked, which historically they haven't really been blocked, if those 5 and 10s do get rolled, it does give them a lot of extra resources to trade, but more importantly, it helps them hold on to that largest road, which, as I said, I don't think they have to be too worried about losing. But it's not a necessarily disastrous decision by any means, and you can definitely see the rationale behind it. We talked about it's so hard to, the inclination always is to put that city on your highest production spot, maximize the advantage of having that double resource when those numbers get rolled. We've seen it with Spatula Steve, and we've seen it with Joni, but we'll see how it all plays out for both of them. And Spatula Steve now 9 cards in hand, lots of wood in hand, we know, because that 5 was just rolled. Let's see what they choose to do with their turn.
Lots of options here. Hopefully with the table talk, I think again, right? There are 4 VPs. They look very, very weak, and I think that's very, very important for their game, right? Uh, they do have the settlement spots, right? That's gonna be super strong. Once they settle on that 6 brick, I think it'll be a different game for them. And you see them
Having to give a four
getting
for
that,
one.
yeah,
But
yeah.
hey, they got what?
Oh,
Interesting.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense, I guess.
First of all, Spatial Steve is the champion of 4-for-1s. I think it's the third or fourth they've pulled this game. They
Yeah.
definitely have been resorting to that. But not only are they able to build a settlement, they're able to have the extra road resources to place it a little bit higher, get their 2-for-1 brick port, or not brick port, or port, give them a little extra flexibility. Oh, and we see a 7-game rolled right when extra large is at 8 cards in hand. Whatever
Ooh,
the plans they
yeah.
had for their turn definitely halted.
Yeah, I think that's rough. They might have had some good stuff cooking.
Yeah,
Um,
and
but
if you're them now, where do you place this robber? You were the one who placed it on the 10 wheat spot. That definitely is your preferred spot, and so now you're not really going to your ideal spot anymore. So what do you think?
I think honestly, 8 sheep is very interesting. If we're convinced that red is an actual threat, but they decide to go for the 8 wood, hitting what maybe are the real threats in black and orange. I'm not really sure. Everyone's kind of a threat at this point, and it does hop back over to the 8 sheep. So
Yeah, and immediately immediately that being moved pays off huge for AK-48. An immediate 10 getting rolled. They get 3 wheat in hand, and not only that, they're able to use their knight in hand to get largest army. There are 8 victory points. No more development
Oh
cards in their
man,
hand, but largest army is pretty comfortably in hand. They're back up to 8 resources, just like that. This could be
the
entering the end
production is
game for
unreal.
them.
Yeah, I think they're on a roll right now, and I think they're pretty unstoppable. If they 7 out, then maybe things get interesting, but they'll be able to city pretty quickly.
Yeah, their resource production just on a metric scale is huge, and they have a 3-for-1 port, and they have a 2-for-1 port on the resource they roll the most. Every
Yeah,
9 is a half
perfect setup.
resource. Every 8 is 1.5. Every 5 is any resource. They are looking quite scary, and we talked about they already had that 10 they just rolled 2, so we know they have the wheat in hand. I would be shocked if the way it's going, if a 7 doesn't get rolled, if AK-48 can't city on their next turn.
Yeah, we'll see. I think right now everyone else is probably kind of clamoring together to just like make sure that they can do anything to prevent a black win. Maybe they'll try to help blue take largest army to take it away from black, but it'll take some time. So
Yep.
we'll see.
Yeah, and blue has had the development card in hand for a while they haven't used, but they got to play 2 knights, and that's at least 2 turns, 2 rotations, and AK-48 is starting to look at the point where 2 full rotations around the board might not be a given.
Yeah, it's looking rough. We're just hoping for a 7 here if we're not black, right? And no 7 yet. So we hope again that black rolls a 7, and that's all we can hope for right now. I
Yeah,
think it's going to be tough otherwise.
and we see extra large immediately going for that development card. They have to do that. Not only is that first of all a crucial part of their game plan, but we talked about they need that largest army not only to win, but now it's just about survival and taking it back from AK-48.
Yeah, and we'll see. I mean, now they finally get a 3. They don't 7 out, and they buy a dev card.
Yeah, it looks like AK-48
2 dev cards.
didn't have exactly enough resources to be able to get that third ore they needed to city, so opting instead to buy 2 development cards, which, if you're AK-48, of course you were hoping for that city, but 2 development cards is still quite scary. There could be, of course, not both victory points, but at least one of them could be a victory point, and they could have more knights to really hold on to that largest army. And hey, if it's a road builder, if it's a monopoly, all these will give them options down the road, and the machine continues to roll.
Yeah. I think it'll be a very interesting end. I don't know if anyone else can really kind of claw their way back, but we'll see people go for it, right? Like it's go for broke at this point, right? It's you win or you lose. This is the finals.
Yeah, and we see Special Steve trying to make some trades. AK-48 starting an embargo against their 3 competitors. Obviously, they have realized they are not going to ever be able to work a trade out because of how scary they look. I love if you
Yeah.
look if you look on the right side, you can see the chat log for the game. You can see, I think this happened about half an hour ago. Extra large said that black was scary, and AK-48 was like, "Whoa, what are you talking about?" Well, they have become even more scary, and they have they've decided, hey, click and reject all these trades. Too much work. I don't need y'all.
Yeah, he's making the first move, establishing dominance there, and we see another settle for orange.
Yeah, never settle for orange, and we can see. Let's see what extra large has up. Their sleeves 2 development cards in hand with 7 resources. Special Steve. Oh, using Year of Plenty, and then
Yep.
going straight for another
Cards. Okay.
2 development cards. They're at 3 in hand. Victory points could be part of those, but because AK-40 was able to get those 2 development cards on the last turn, the road for extra large to get largest army is looking steep. But Spatula Steve, quickly comment, did get their settlement on that 9-4 spot. They're up to 6 VP in hand. They're right in this, but we can see AK-48 not really getting luck anymore, passing the turn, and this might give the breathing room that the rest of their competitors need. But it's starting to look quite scary for extra large, I think, in terms of staying in this game.
So what do you think Black has here? They've passed with two death cards in hand.
I I think that it really could be anything. We know that
Yeah.
one of them is not a VP, otherwise the game would be over. But if they're largest armies, they don't need to use
They would
them.
play. They would play. They
But
would
you
play a
think they
knight,
would
wouldn't
use
they?
it to get rid of the
I
10?
don't know. I don't know. There's arguments against it because you might want to entice everyone else to play their knights, just
Yeah.
to just to try to race you, right? Or something, and then you play because then you get their dev cards out, and then you like know what people might have.
Yeah, and
It's kind of
maybe
a 4D play. I'm not sure, but
yeah.
still, right? If they don't have a knight there, so I'm interested to see what they have. Maybe one of those
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah, I still think that if it was me, I think I would be tempted for sure to use the knight still because cementing your lead is, further is going to be fine and it's not like the 10 being blocked later is going to be worse than the 10 being blocked now. And if you're, maybe you're thinking extra large because they have 3 in hand has to have at least a couple knights and so they're going to
Hmm.
probably want to use them, but if you're extra large, maybe you just let it sit there. Who knows? The 7s get rolled, which this all makes me start to think that AK-48. If put a gun to my head, I'd probably tell you I don't. I my guess would be that neither are knights, and that is a
Yeah.
scary proposition because it's either it might be one VP or start 9 and a year of plenty. What you're hoping is that's a road builder, and that doesn't really serve
Yeah.
them much use. Maybe they can use it to settle, for sure. But all the outcomes, if they're not knights, are quite scary. And so I think, yeah, if you're AK-48 too, there's that element where if you had a knight in your hand in this previous turn, even if you didn't need to use it and you thought you were okay with the robber sticking on, you're trying to entice your competitors to burn their knights, maybe you burn that knight to say, hey, I'm not as scary. I don't have a monopoly and a victory point in hand.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I agree. I think knights are generally considered the weakest dev cards. So yeah, I would play it just to lower your threat level because 8 with 2 dev cards is as scary as it gets.
Yeah, we can see Spatula Steve desperately trying to get some wheat now. Looks like they might get a taker from Joni. And Spatula Steve, only at 6 in hand, a little bit far away from getting any of the bonuses from Largest Army or Largest Road, but they could have some interesting options here. AK-48 is encouraging them to complete, is encouraging Joni to complete the circle.
That's right. That's right. Just for the aesthetics of it.
I mean, it is
So
quite pretty
I
up
respect
top.
it.
And for Joni,
Hmm.
it definitely serves a strategic purpose, giving them
Yeah.
access to more spots to put settlements. They
Hmm.
have those options that we talked about when Special Steve had that we called a red carpet. Well, Joni now has seen our analogy and said, how dare you, the red carpet is mine and I will make it imminently clear. But extra large right now could be poised for a fun little play with 10 cards in hand and 3 development cards.
Hmm. Yeah. Interesting possibilities here. 3 dev cards could still be anything. And yeah, we'll have to see what they decide to do here. I'm not
Yeah.
exactly sure
What do you
what
think
they
of
can do
this
other than
trade
buy dev
offer
cards.
here? Offering to give
I'm
up
not really
one
sure.
brick for 2 more. Saying
I'm not sure
usually
that
2 for
anyone will ever
1s.
accept that.
Yeah,
I'm not sure anyone will accept a 1-for-1 there. So I mean, yeah,
usually the 2 for 1 is offered with you giving up 2 to entice the pot,
yeah,
but they obviously seem to think that they have identified a weakness in the market, which
yeah,
is interesting to me because if you look at the piles of resources, you can see that a decent amount of brick cards have been pulled and are in hands.
yeah, yeah. So it shouldn't be that valuable for people. But instead deciding to play the knight and stealing from red here.
Yeah, and brings them up to 3 knights in hand. I think we're about to really find out if AK-48 has that knight in hand
I
because
think he was
you
trying
can't.
to. I think he was trying to steal wheat. If I'm wheat or sheep,
Yeah,
one of those.
but we can
Probably
see
for
they're
the
able to give a brick to Spatulous Steve for 2 ore. Hey, know your audience, know your market,
Yeah.
and let's see. They have a lot of resources in hand, a lot of city and development card resources. Buying another development card, and right now, if AK, this is a crucial moment for AK-48 because if they don't have a knight in hand, they are poised to lose largest army to extra large on extra large's next turn.
Yeah. This is the scary part, right? Like you would rather have the knight there. You would have rather have pulled the knight maybe with one of those two dev cards. So if they potentially lose army, then they're going to be in a tough spot again, right? They kind of have lost their window. They can't settle on very many spots, if any. I think they have a weak spot down there, but um, it'll be tough, right? Like if you're back down to six after losing army, you're in last place. Like that's it. And that's how quickly it goes, right? 2 point swings, just like that.
Yeah, if they they do have two cards in hand, they do have seven, or two development cards. AK also has seven cards in hand, so hopefully on the next turn they can lock this down if you're an AK-48 fan. But if they can't lock it down, it goes back to extra large. Extra large takes largest army. They go up to at least six, if not more, victory points, and then you're looking across the board, and maybe Spatula Steve becomes the big enemy. That's seven victory points without any bonuses.
Yeah, anything can happen here. I mean, I'm very curious to see what Black has here, just because they've
They're
held
10
on to those two
cards in
dev cards for
hand.
a while. So
Yeah.
this is gonna be a big turn here because 10 cards and those two dev cards. I have to imagine one of them is gonna be played in the effort of maybe building a city.
Yeah,
But
they do have three
we'll see.
wheat in hand, and so a Year of Plenty or Monopoly probably can get them there, but especially because they can steal. Remember, okay, we can see them using that night. We said they had to have that night, and
Okay.
they do have the night. Give themselves a little bit extra.
Wow.
Whoa, what was that? What was that? I that would
Very
that no that
disguised
well, no
night
that
there.
that's a mistake. That's a they're
But
trying to
yeah, that was
trade
yeah.
with the bank, but
With the bank.
they only need to offer three brick for the bank because they have a 3-4
That's
port.
right. That's right. That's
Yeah,
right.
we can see the quick
Um,
pop up and say nope, I didn't mean that. Yeah, but we can see the reactions in the chat. Um, Making the trade with the bank. They're eight or nine in hand. It is their development card. Wow. Okay, they didn't. Every time they pull a development card, we're on victory watch.
yeah. This is crazy. I
Oh,
think they're just
huge
trying to
roll
pull
for
some
Spatula
VPs.
Steve with a four there.
So my thought is they must have. Oh, I don't actually even know because they would probably just want to go for a city if they had a VP in hand. So that makes me think they don't have a VP in hand unless they just pulled one now. They could
Yeah,
have
or
pulled one
maybe they
now.
couldn't. It could be another night. We talked about. We didn't think they're. They did have that one night in hand, so it just could be another
Hmm.
night. They could have two nights in hand.
Yeah.
But Specialist Steve here just got four ore from that four being rolled, and now to get three timber from that five being rolled, up to 10 cards in hand. They've put together a nice little production factory for themselves.
Yeah. I mean, big turns, right? I think everyone is in it, right? We see Uh, blue is could be at a potential seven. We see orange is at a potential eight, right? And again, right, even if these dev cards are not VPs, they could still be translated into VPs, right? And that's very important. Um, so everyone has a really good chance. And we see red, right? Red has the two spots they need just to win the game. That's it.
Yeah.
Uh, they actually would run out of settlements, so they need to settle in the city, but they win the game if they settle in the city. That's it. That's the game. Um, so that's their path to victory, and no one can stop them. Not a single person can stop them if they get the resources.
Yeah, you can
And then
block them, but that's it.
yeah, and then we see black, right? Black with the obvious production. The only issue with them is they don't have ore, but maybe they hope that they pull for something like you're playing your Monopoly and get that ore somehow, or and then after that they just pull for death cards. Like they could road settle. They have tons of options here.
Yeah.
And orange here, obviously with the 10 cards and the one death card, we'll have to see what they do, right? But
But could very
it's gonna take
easily.
some tabletop.
Yeah, and definitely has going for, the only one who's gone to 7 VP without having the bonus from largest army, largest road. Their resource production cannot be knocked. They of course don't have a 3-for-1 port, but every time that 4 gets rolled or that 6 gets rolled, they can utilize their ore port if need be. It's starting to look like maybe the odd person out is extra large blue because they're really, it's a very glaring 4 victory points on the board from them.
Yeah, yeah, it's a very tough spot to be in, especially because they weren't able to get any more cities after that first one. Specifically because that 6 war was hit all the time, right? Because once you get that first city, you become an instant target. You become a target for the whole game, right? And that hampered their production a ton, right? They needed that 6 war spot. And
Yeah,
we see
using a knight.
another robber and using a
Yeah.
knight and then placing the robber
Yep, moving back to
on
that 10
10.
ore spot,
Hmm.
still identifying AK-48 as the biggest threat, which it's hard to knock it when they have 8 VP and 2 development cards in hand. And we'll see if they have 8 cards in hand now for extra large. Looks like they don't know if they can really city here, so it might be another development card kind of churn for them. AK-48, I can't wait to see if they have another knight in hand.
Yeah, they easily could, and I think if they did, then they would have to play it because they don't want to risk blue just sneaking it away from them at the last second, right? So they're probably going to play it if they have it. If they don't, then they're in big trouble. But I think they'll more likely to have it than not, and we'll see. I mean, we do see blue buying another dev card, so
Yeah, and with 3 develop cards in hand, now AK-48 is in the same position we talked about last term, where if they have a knight, yep, they use a knight. Yep. So they're going to
makes
hold on to
sense.
the largest army, really making it a 2-horse race here.
Yeah,
And exactly what they needed to do, moving it off. Only, it could be a VP in hand still, could be another knight. And we will see. Oh, and a 7 getting rolled immediately afterward. That's 6 for Spatula Steve. Spatula Steve chose to ride the lightning and hold 9 cards in hand. Didn't really do much on their turn with the hope of even more explosive turn coming up and having to roll a 7 and see 5 or 4 resources get discarded for Specialist Steve. Not ideal.
yeah, and
And then they got stolen from too.
yeah,
Insult to injury.
it's a brutal turn. Brutal turn. Going from 8 to 3, just like that. And we see them discarding the
AK
road
48 pulls
resources.
another
So,
development card. And once
yep,
again, we still stand. The game is not over.
yeah. Uh, it's super tight, right? You see a 2 horse race between blue and black for largest army, and then you see a 2 horse race potentially with longest road between
But we'll see.
red and.
It doesn't.
But I
It's
think
good
it's over
enough
at this
to.
point. Yeah,
Yeah, it
I
is.
think at this point it's probably over. But as I say that, but locking up longest road is very good. Now they just need to settle and say, like you said,
Yeah, and
and
hey,
they
the
can do it
circle
with
has been
force.
completed for Joni.
That's right. That's right. The dream is complete.
Yeah, and Joni now. It's you're still in a position here where AK-48 is definitely the scariest because they're 8. They have 2 development cards in hand. They have all sorts of options open to them. Joni, without any development cards in hand, is really stuck in this wait and see approach where they really need to figure out ways to get ore, and they're going to need to figure out ways to get at least 2, if not 3 or more ore, because they're going to need development cards or cities to get to 10. And Spatula Steve only at 7, could be at 8, but doesn't really have an easy option. Maybe their road is a little bit more open in terms of they have more diversity of resource production, perhaps more opportunities to get victory points or development through development cards or through cities than Joni does. And so I think you're definitely at a point where my power rankings right now is probably AK-48. Special Steve and Joni are so close because I said Special Steve probably
Yeah.
has more flexibility, but has 1 less VP. And
Yeah.
extra large definitely in a position here where they are having to basically use all their resources to fight AK-48 for largest army and not really having much to show for it.
Yeah, and an interesting road from Orange here. I think placing on the brick spot, right? Where are they trying to go there?
Yeah, I think that maybe they're just in the position because there's no settlement opportunities up there. I still think you would have probably put it on that 3
Yeah,
mid
and they
spot.
do that. But yeah, I don't. I mean, the extra road is perhaps unnecessary. I would actually even go for the literal 6, like to the on the desert, like go for the 3 for 1 port. just for the 3 for 1 port, that's totally fine.
Yeah, I
And you get the easy settlement slot, right?
yeah, I think analyzing the board a bit more, it maybe could be a long play because if you're looking at Joni here, Joni's the great thing about Joni's setup is that Joni can expand on their setup and not lose. And so, but the thing is, in order for Joni to expand on their road collection, they need to kind of find an open space to build upon, and maybe Special Steve's thinking, hey, Joni might build in that top area to extend their road, and so I'll kind of start to try to head them off. But you still have to build 5 roads to 5 roads
Yeah.
without them building any new roads, and that's going to be
Well,
a tall order.
here's the thing. Here's the thing. Everyone only gets 15 roads, so the max you could ever build is 15. In
Yeah,
this
so that
case,
doesn't even really
Orange
matter.
can never
Yeah.
even catch up. Orange can never even catch up.
Oh,
So
you're
the
right.
race for
Good
Oxford is
call.
over. It's locked up.
Yeah, good call. Good call.
Hmm.
And so then we're in a position where that question becomes maybe even a little bit more head scratching with that piece of analysis.
Right.
But we'll see extra large sound cards in hand. They use their knights. They pull back into tie with the AK-48, just back and forth with those knights and those robbers. But we'll see. We will see extra large. About 28 seconds left on their turn. They're debating. They've been offering lots of trades. They don't really seem to have lots of takers. I will say Specialist Steve hasn't formally rejected the trade on the screen. I imagine there's some table talk there and some negotiation between Specialist Steve and Extra Large.
Yeah.
Especially because we
You
know
know,
that
I
Specialist Steve took the last brick. That was a 2-for-1 offer.
Yeah, yeah. It's very interesting, right? Seeing the dynamics play out with the lack of resources, especially in the end game. Like, people just don't want to trade in general, right? Because you don't want to give people the win, and we see a huge role
Well,
here.
AK-48
Black with
pulling their
11.
development card doesn't win, and they use a knight. So they had a
Oh,
knight. And the AK-48 did have another knight. They used that. They just pulled another development card. They're up to 10 in hand and do not win. I mean, how many knights are even left in the deck at this point? I mean, there's 14, right? So
yeah. I think there should be
there's one
14
knight
total.
left, right?
One night they could have the one night in hand.
But no matter what, now largest army is locked up. Largest army, largest road are
You're
now
right.
completely
That's a good
locked up.
point.
That can't be changed. Now it just becomes who can build their cities and settlements and who can pull those victory points. And AK-48 with 2 cards in hand, there might be another knight in there, but it's at least a victory point or something else.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see how this plays out because now everything is set. So we can confidently say that black and red are at 8. Black is probably at 9, if I have to guess, and orange is probably at a solid 8, just because they would have probably played that F card at this point.
Yeah.
So there's probably one more VP, maybe 2 more VPs in the deck, but
Yeah,
that
there's
deck is
not
running
many
out.
cards left in the deck. I mean, we've
Mhm.
seen one Monopoly, one Euro Plenty, one Road Builder, I believe, right?
That sounds right. I haven't noticed any others at least. So this
Oh,
is a very
4
stacked
Specialist
slot
Steve
end of the deck.
praying to God for a 4 in the chat, and if 4 is
Yeah,
delivered, they have 11 cards in hand.
it's huge.
Yeah, let's see what they can do.
Probably city, probably settle.
Yeah, they have a
Either
settle.
or works.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it. It is now getting to the point where you're victory point hunting. All right, they build a city. They're up to an 8, maybe 9 in hand.
They're gonna pull now. They're gonna try to pull.
Yeah,
If not this turn, then they'll just pull from now on.
yeah, and I mean, there's 5 cards. There's 5 cards that are pulled. Only one of them can be a knight. There's probably already victory points going around. At this point, with the way 8 is probably extra large, has at least 1 or 2 victory points. I would have to assume, and like at this point, like my operating assumption is extra large, Specialist Steve, AK-48 all have at least 1 victory point. None of the, maybe 2 for extra large, and AK-48 maybe has that last night. Maybe just a road builder they've sat on. They're like, this is never really going to be that useful unless I'm trying to settle. But we'll see.
Yeah,
And
I
Specialist
think I
Steve
think
trying to get that development card.
the end of this dev card stock is going to be really, really nasty. Like you're going to want that stuff, I think, because that's going to swing the end of the game, and all that stuff is super powerful. Like we've seen all the knights being played, right? So everything else is a super powerful
Yeah, and
card.
we know at least 1 VP is still in the deck.
Yeah,
Oh my God, the tension.
yeah.
And
This is
Yeah,
This
so
is really getting down to it, right? We see 8, 9, 8, and Black has the two dev cards, probably one VP, and Orange could easily be at an easy 9, and Blue is probably out of it at this point, given how close everyone else is. But they do have 10 cards. Maybe they'll do something with it. 3, 4, and
yeah,
4. They pick the city. You
yeah.
know what I mean?
Specialist Steve, not able to make the trades done. Extra large. It's at the point now where you probably have to assume that AK-48, Joni, and Spatula are all at 9 VP, and so either one can win on their turn by pulling that last VP, building a settlement or building a city, which they all really have the ability to do so if they get the proper resource. I mean, AK-48 has 8 cards in hand. I mean, who knows what they can do on their turn. Extra large has in a 7-game rolled the 10 cards in hand,
Yeah.
not even really help them out, but AK-48 will have to discard 4 as well, so that could be buying breathing room. The biggest winner of all this is maybe looking like Joni.
Yeah, I mean, they again, right? Like they just have a super clear path to victory. Everyone else kind of relies a lot more on chance, I would say. But yeah, getting it off that eight sheep is huge in general, no matter what.
Yeah.
So
And so we'll see where
huge for
extra
them.
large chooses to move. Then the robber, if you're extra large, you're staring down a lot of bad choices, of course.
Yeah, nothing really helps you too much at this point. You're just trying to figure out who can you hit that will most delay the win, right? So maybe you would go for the 8 wood or the 4 ore.
Yeah, and
Either
going
way,
for that
right?
8 wood, trying to hit 2 of his competitors at once, but it is it is looking tough for extra large, and we talked about
Hmm.
it. They took that early placement spot. They did get that early trade from Special Steve that looked so nice. They had that city early, but they were just too exposed on that 6 ore spot, and that 6 ore spot was blocked for so much. And then before they knew it, their options were kind of limited, and they were behind and not really able to ever get the momentum they needed to secure largest army. And now they pull in our development card. They could have 3 in hand, but even if they do have 3 in hand, that's only up to 7. And they got it's almost impossible for them to win because they can't settle. Even if they build 2 more cities, they got to pull the 4th VP, which statistically there probably isn't a 4th VP in the deck anymore.
Yeah, yeah. You never know, but yeah, that would be
The
extremely
chance you have
unlikely.
to have the
And
perfect and the chances are near astronomical. You
yeah,
basically have to assume. I think there's only is there only one. I think there's one development card left in the deck.
how do you know that?
Well, we see in monopolies now. We've had 2 monopolies used. There's two.
Yep.
There's a road sitting out there. Oh, pulls another development card. Yep, that was the last one. That was the last one.
Okay,
The
yeah, good
development card
call, good
is
call.
now grayed
And
out.
the mono stole four sheep, and with that, buying that
Yeah,
last
but did
card, which is
not win
huge,
the
right?
game. So
Did
now
not win the game.
basically we know exactly what everyone has in hand.
Yes,
It is extra
exactly.
large has 3 VPs in hand. AK-48 has a VP in hand. Specialist Steve has a VP in hand. AK-48 I believe has the road builder as their
Yeah,
last card.
that's right. Which is completely useless, which is why they didn't play it.
Yeah, I mean
So
they
makes
can
sense.
they can build a road maybe to like save some resources to try to settle on
Just
that 10
settle.
spot.
That's it. That's
But
it. Yep.
that's it. And so we are now entirely who can settle first, and it's Specialist Steve.
Oh my God.
Specialist Steve coming in. Wow.
10-9-9-7. Wow.
Wow. Building that city right there. Had that one VP in hand that we noted, and Specialist Steve with a truly impressive victory. Largest army, largest road. Who needs it? Specialist Steve says, "Give me a shovel and give me some brick, and I will build an empire."
Yeah, honestly, amazing gameplay, all around, honestly. But yeah, like you said, right, Spatula Steve throughout this entire tournament has had this consistent gameplay of just kind of laying in the background, kind of biding their time, always staying in it, and then striking when no one else might expect it, right? It just incredible stuff, right? And I think just all around great plays from everyone in this finals group.
Yeah, and Special Steve did their exact game plan. We noted that was their game plan. They pulled through at the end, and taking a look at at the dice rolls. The dice roll is pretty even, a little distribution more heavily on the 9, but like looking at those those resource stats at the end, we can see AK-40 had tons of resources, but just very well played. Spatula Steve taking that long route, taking that slow route where they were like, I'm not going to look that threatening. I might get robbed, but it's just going to be incidental. And then coming through, ending the game with 4 cities and a settlement. Really, really, really strong stuff. Those 4s, the MVP of the game, perhaps.
Yeah, for sure. And the ore port coming in clutch too, right? Because of those 4s. Yeah, very flawlessly executed, honestly. Um, yeah, it's like almost the perfect game from everyone.
Yeah, I mean, 10 to 9 to 9 in extra
Yeah,
large.
anything could have
Couldn't really
happened.
win there at the end, but was a huge part of that game for the whole entire thing.
Yeah,
Exactly what you'd expect from the 4 people that reached the finals. A truly great game, and it's been a great season. It's been a pleasure
it has.
to share it with you, share it with these competitors, share it with our
Yeah,
audience. And what a way to end it! Every single development card getting pulled down to the wire at an hour and 18 minutes and 78 turns. What a way to end the
yeah,
season.
yeah. Great gameplay. Great game. Uh, just everything that could have possibly happened, right? So you love to see it. Like we had races on both fronts, and even though Orange lost both races, still coming out with the
But
win
hey, maybe
without
the
even
table
having
talk
crit for a
champion.
lot of it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
12
12 is
trades
everything.
that they
Mhm.
completed to 4 combined from the rest of their competitors. Spatula Steve weaving and bobbing and talking their way to the victory here. And
Yeah,
I, for one, can't wait to see if, maybe a little spoiler, if they can defend their crown in our next season.
yeah. It'll be very interesting, and I can't wait. I can't wait for it.
All right. Well, on that note, then I think I'll say goodbye to your audience. We'll see you soon, and thank you for sticking with us.